Freljord is one of the most important traits to understand this set. It is highly versatile as a flexible 3-unit core, as well as a kappa for many meta lines. The mainline Freljord board on level 8 looks like this. You play all 5 of the original Freljord units plus Vi and Braum. With this, you get Warden for your main tank Braum, but also slot in Defender and Piltover, which are 2 of the strongest team-wide bonuses. Even with recent nerfs to Piltover and Vi, it's very likely this will still be the default line, as it's extremely cheap and compact for the value it brings. Then, in your final level 8 slot, you can pretty much play any unit. Your best options are of course going to be 5-cost units, or any units like Taric, Skarner, or Zoe that provide situational utility. Ornn, Kindred, and Zilean are all 5-costs that activate traits. But 5-costs like Fiddle, Shyvana, and Lucian can still provide enough value to play even without traits. From this point onwards, the board is upgraded through unlocks. Orianna plays over Vi, and Kobuko is your 4th invoker. Once you're in the spot, it's quite difficult to upgrade your board further without unlocking Volibear or finding a Zilean on 9. If you do, however, fulfill these requirements, it's easy as playing Zilean over Anivia and dropping down to 5 Freljord to play Volibear at 3. At level 9, you'll notice that you have 2 free unit slots. You can fill these slots up with Taric, Skarner, or pretty much any 5-cost you have items for. Now let's talk about itemization, as I think it's one of the more important parts of this comp. Lissandra's best build is a crit build with double Nashers and JG. This build is by far the best one in the stats, and here's the explanation. It's the build that gives her the most mana, while also providing her with a 100% crit chance. To optimize a unit's damage, you want 3 things: stats, amp, and crit. Lissandra already gets a lot of amp from Freljord. She actually gets a whopping 40% just from 5 Freljord. On top of that, Lissandra's ability gives her 12% more amp if she's casting on a chilled enemy. In this comp, this should happen pretty much every time. All this comes to a total of 52% amp on Lissandra. The stats are also covered by these items as well, as each Nashers provides 15 AP and JG provides 35 for a grand total of 65 AP. This build also provides 75% crit, which, when added to your base crit chance, is a total of 100%. Now, while this build is a huge improvement over the next best build, and quite important, it's obviously difficult to get every game. I would recommend just sticking with 1 JG and 1 Nashers and flexing your 3rd item. You can go for an AP item like Rabadons or Archangels, a 3rd crit item like Guardbreaker, a mana item like Adaptive or Shojin, or a utility like Void or Morello. Just avoid amp items like Giant Slayer, as amp will provide diminishing returns. In set 16, playing your strongest board is extremely important, so most times you'll be slamming tempo items and not having anything close to the strongest build. That's perfectly fine. As mentioned earlier, Lissandra can hold pretty much any AP related item. This was simply to showcase how much stronger Lissandra can be when given an opportunity to greet items, such as with Pandora's items or with Lost Streaking. Speaking of Lost Streaking, I think Lissandra is one of the few comps you can lose streak into, allowing you to change your carousel priority for the superior build. This is why component priority in this comp is so strange. Unlike typical AP comps, you don't really care about tiers or rods. Instead, Bell takes the highest priority. You want to make double Nashers, and you want to make Warmogs. We'll get into why Warmogs is so important later, but to make all these items, you need to prioritize Belt off Carousel. You can never have too much Belts, as, even after making double Nashers and Warmogs, you can make anti-heal items or generic tank items. The next prior is Bow, as you need them to make double Nashers. Extra bows are fine because you can make red buff and kill your tier with Void Staff. Rod still has importance, as you need to make JG, and I like making Spark over Void Staff in this comp. So why did I say Warmog is so important? Because the easiest way to unlock Volibear in this line is to put 1 Warmogs on a Braum 2. This is enough to push his HP over 3800, which unlocks Volibear right away. Without this, you're pretty much stuck on this board until level 9. While not a weak board, you could be playing a much stronger version just by having Volibear. You play Volibear over Ashe, and play Kobuko over Sona. This way you get a much better unit than Ashe, as well as Bruiser for your entire board. Once you find Zilean, you can play it over Anivia, and drop Sejuani for better 5 costs. You can see why unlocking Volibear is so important in this line. To talk about all the best ways to unlock him, I brought in Fungster, a challenger player who's peaked rank 12 in NA. So what's the best way to unlock Volibear?
The best way to unlock Volibear is to be playing 5 Freljord and have a Warmogs on a Braum 2. That will just automatically unlock Volibear regardless of what other items you have in your Braum.
So the threshold is 3800 HP, but hitting Braum 2 and having a Warmogs is kind of tough for every game. Is there another way that you can unlock it?
Instead of just having a Warmogs, you can try and get around 800 extra HP onto your Braum 2 through items or other augments that may give you HP. I actually had a game recently that showcased me just slamming extra items and putting in some bruisers to unlock Volibear. So in this game, I actually put in two bruisers on my board, which is the Kabuko and Alawi, to give Braum an extra 150 HP boost, which just edges Braum right over the 3800 threshold to unlock Volibear. If you have Sejuani too, and also a Warmogs, you just need an extra 500 HP from other sources, such as like items and two bruiser splash. This is like obviously in the case where you low roll and don't find a Braum 2 by stage 4-7 by neutrals or whatnot.
So even with all these methods of unlocking Volibear, there's obviously some games where it's going to be pretty impossible to unlock this unit. What do you do then?
Volibear himself is a great way to cap out the Lysandra carry 5 Freljord board, but you don't necessarily need to always play around Volibear as your cap. You can always just play these 5 core units, Sejuani, Braum, Lysandra, Anivia, and Ashe, actually, and start capping around Splashable 5 cost and Kindred. Kindred pairs very nicely with Ashe as a quick striker, a Shyvana that can actually pair well with Braum with a Nautilus, or just any splashable 5 costs such as Fiddle, or even 4 costs such as Taric, that have these board-wide bonuses, regardless if their trade is active or not.
So what is the early game for this comp? I get this question all the time, and I have to explain. It's literally whatever can hold the items that you're playing for. So if there's a comp that wants Nashor's JG, and I slam Nashor's JG early, then it is an open line you can play. I think thinking about what early board you can play for a certain level 8 comp is really bad TFT, and you should be thinking the opposite. You should be thinking about building a strong early game and then what you can play from there. So for instance, this is like a nice early game board where you just play around defenders. You unlock Poppy when you put 2 items on Jarvan, and then you get to play your Invoker's backline. You don't have to play Freljord in the early game to play towards the comp. As long as you have 1 copy of Nivea and Ashe, it should be pretty easy. You're looking for Braum, Lysandra, and Sejuani, which can be rolled for on level 8. So your early game can be anything like Zoe, Teemo, Yordles, anything with a good early game, and can slam AP items. One thing I will say is that because this comp wants specific items and stabilizes so hard in 8 off Braum 2, Lysandra 2, which you'll be wanting to roll pretty hard for, I think it's one of the best loose streak comps in this patch after Singe was nerfed. So I think the 2 best lost streak comps are this and Warwick. But Warwick Freljords needs a Vi 2 as a condition. Once Singe gets buffed next patch, once his unlock condition is changed, I think it will be the best loose streak comp, like Zon must be always. But I think until then, this is pretty solid for that contention. In terms of positioning, there's quite a lot to talk about, as Freljord is a position-heavy trait by nature. You shouldn't greed the buffs on every unit. Freljords get the most value as they get 150% of the base value. So if you're playing around 3 Freljord and you have 1 tower, it's kind of hard to position everyone in it without griefing your positioning by clumping too much and causing all your units to get stunned and take AoE damage. If you're playing a level 8 board like this is usually how I like to default position. I have Braum and Lysandra by themselves, as it avoids any largest clump targeting CC like Swain, Fiddle, Shyvana. I like Lysandra towards the middle because she has a big AoE, so I want to maximize her damage. Braum wants to be in front of Lysandra because I think he is the best unit to spread chill, and Volibear should usually be behind the strongest tank, as it's really hard for him to be targeted until Braum dies. If you're in a spot where you want to be constantly changing sides, I would just default my Frozen Towers here and swap my backliners based on what I need. At the time of the recording, this is still somewhat early in the set, so there's bound to be new texts and new lines discovered. I'll update new information and optimizations in the comments below, so check back there if you're watching this in the future. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.